Howdy, my third video. I had originally planned to do a thing on origins or bust, that trope in anti-evolutionism, but I'll get to that later. I really can't resist making a comment on something that caused my old vertebrate jaw to drop. Stephen Miller, the chief policy advisor to the Trump administration on George Stephanopoulos' this morning. The guy was exhibiting all the classic Tortucan traits. That's the concept of somebody living under a stiff mental mind shell and that they're absolutely impervious to evidence, that they're wrong, and they just keep plowing on ahead and you can never get them to answer a straight question, and they never defend their evidence, but they keep on insisting it. And that Tortucan alert was just flashing wildly because everything Miller said fell into that category, up to and including his doubling down on the mythology that there is widespread voter fraud. And not only would he not attempt to offer any evidence, even though poor George Stephanopoulos prodded him again and again and again on it and reminded him there's no evidence of that. Miller just repeated the tropes. Oh, go on up to Vermont and you can see, anyone who's been to Vermont knows that there was fraud. Well, what it is that John Sununu had made a claim of that back a ways, and he had to back off from it because his accusation that there were busloads of people coming in to vote wasn't true, and he offered no evidence that it was true. So what we got here, my suspicion is that just like creationists who use exactly the same methodology, and people who believe the earth is flat who use exactly the same methodology, and people who think that everybody but William Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare's plays use the same methodology. Miller is likely to have been troping off of secondary sources that he never bothered to fact check, never even slightly tried to source document anything, and he just makes that become whatever he believes it to be true. The idea that such a person should be in any position of senior policy advisor to a doormat is really troublesome. But that's what we're going to be getting with Donald Trump. Uh, Everybody in his administration is Miller-class Tortucan. And we're going to see one train wreck after another and an awful lot of circumstances where people of level heads are going to be like George Stephanopoulos, wanting to bang their head against a wall, trying to figure out how to get these people to pay some attention to facts. This is way beyond the kind of press agent dissembling that you get in a conventional administration. This is a new class, and that's why I'm so fearful about the fact that there is such a range of Tortucans running around in the Trump administration. This is not a good thing to happen. And how people in the media and people at the grassroots are going to have to find ways to hold people to account and to find common cause with people who still have functioning brain stems and aren't living in their little Tortucan shells, because the Republic can't survive if you've got this level of numbskullery going on routinely at the top. I've never seen in all of the history of the country such a heavy pileup of people who shouldn't be in positions of authority in positions of authority. And it's as bad as what's going on in Turkey, where the Erdogan administration is starting to shred their great tradition of secularism. That is not going to bode well in that region of the world. And the rise in some of these neo-fascistic, hyper-populist, xenophobic parties in France and in other countries in Europe also worries me, because I don't want to find myself living in the 1920s leading up to the 1930s, leading up to a reprise of the Second World War. That's how these things run off the rails. And I have theoretically enough life expectancy that I could live to see another one of those. Yeah, I know enough about the history of it to not want to have to go through that, even though I managed to miss that coming along as a post-war baby boomer. So, Stephen Miller, you are a disgrace. You should not be in any position of authority advising anybody on anything, even how to install a doorknob, let alone an advisor to the President of the United States. And it is a further reflection of the ideological numbskullery and cluelessness of the Trump administration, to the extent that you are in a position of advisory capacity. That's the facts of the matter, and we'll see what happens. I don't suspect that Miller will ever be let go by the president unless he has the temerity to disagree with him on something, and then his hyper-narcissism will kick in and he'll grease the skids. You're fired. But I don't anticipate that. So, Miller, I'm on Stephanopoulos' side on this one. Thank you very much.